And welcome to a very special audio show on the MMA Plus TV YouTube channel. It's Andreas Georgiou and my Scottish buddy from across the northern border, Stuart Rodger, to bring you the breakdown, the preview for ACB 54 Supersonic this Saturday night at the Manchester Arena. Stuart, huge show, lots to talk about in this preview. And hopefully this preview show, this very special show on the MMA Plus YouTube channel, can kind of kickstart the preview, the analysis, the new kind of shows that I'd like to hopefully do a lot more with you in the coming weeks, months and years.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something we can share with everyone.
Well, you know, if I can get the time off you now that you're the big superstar of the Old Firm MMA podcast.
Well, we do try.
Yeah, shout out to our buddy Sean Ryan. Is it Sean Ryan? I don't even know
his
second
Sean
name.
Ryan.
How long's he been working for the website? Sean Ryan, Irish guy, great dude. But you know, we can talk about bullshit all day. Let's talk about ACB 54 Supersonic. It's kind of like a good, the bad, and the ugly with this card. I don't know where to start, so we will definitely start with the good, with the main event. Luke Barnatt, Mamed, Khalidov. Right when that first got announced, when ACB first pushed that, when the world first saw it, you had to see that the intentions were clearly there from ACB. That they weren't messing around. They were coming to the UK a week before the UFC, mind, and they were putting on one hell of a show. Overall, Stuart, what do you think of this main event fight? What kind of intentions does this show by ACB?
Yeah, once again, it's another promotion coming over to these shows and just completely overshadowing what the UFC is attempting to do at the moment. Dana White made a plea about, Jimmy Manu was your guy, get behind him, but he's really not fooling anyone. A card with Luke Barnatt versus Mamed Khalidov at the top, certainly more attractive than the headliner UFC's bringing over. When you bring Bellator into the mix as well, UFC's really lagging behind in what they're offering to the UK market, and ACB's coming in and filling a gap.
Yeah, I don't want to shit on the UFC because I do quite like the card, but when you put it side by side next to this ACB 54 card, and by what we know so far is the Bellator 179 show in London, my oh my, I don't even think it is comparable.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the UFC card as well, but I think that's the problem. It's a card that's very much aimed at our kind of audience, the hardcore fans, the people that watch every week, and not so much the people that for a one-off night will take themselves out to the O2 Arena.
But at the same time, can we not argue that Luke Barnatt and Mamed Khalidov, are they not kind of a hardcore niche fighters, really?
This is only the second time Khalidov's actually fought outside Russia, so I would say it's a very big event in European MMA. I suppose, again, it is for the niche market, but anyone with an interest that brings out that kind of extra interest in people that might not have bought a ticket before, but now go, do you know what, I'm going because he's going to be there.
Yeah, 100%. Khalidov, what a guy, and it's going to be tremendous to see him over in the UK. The man has not lost since 2010, I believe. He has been, synonymous with the KSW name. You say KSW, you think Mamed Khalidov. He's been a huge part of them growing as a promotion, and he's been arguably their poster boy for a long time now. And him and Luke Barnatt, you look at this fight, and you could arguably say this is Luke's toughest test ever. Who the guys he faced in the UFC: Sean Strickland, Mark Munoz, Roger Narvaez, Matt Nielsen, Andrew Craig. The list goes on and on. Mamed Khalidov is way better than all those guys.
Yeah, I mean, Mamed Khalidov is actually at the point where he's probably the best middleweight that's never fought in the UFC. I mean, as you said, this is probably Luke's toughest test to date. And Mamed Khalidov's actually not really been tested himself as such. He's fought some guys with some really good records, and he's fought some big names. However, he never really took that leap, which every moment I see him go for. I suppose if you're making the kind of money that's been thrown around in Eastern Europe just now, why would you? And especially if you're helping sell out stadiums.
Yeah, 100%. You look at the names there. You look at the names, and I don't think you're giving him enough credit. I think that, yes, Khalidov has been great. He's dominated the Russian scene, the Eastern European scene. But some of these names, like Mikhail Matella, when that fight happened, that was a huge fight because people genuinely thought that Metella was going to give him a run for his money, and it ended in the first round. Khalidov once again proved that he was the best 185er in not only Eastern Europe, but potentially Europe as well. And that seems to be the case every single time they've matched him with someone. Michael Falcao, when they matched him with him, this very tough guy coming from Brazil. Again, Khalidov dismantled him in the first round. Brett Cooper, a very tough, gritty American wrestling style guy, came over and Khalidov dealt with him very well. Again, it seems to be the case that every single time KSW wanted to test Khalidov, he would just blow their test out the water. But I have to agree, Luke Barnatt is very, very different stylistic fighter. I think Khalidov is very confident on the mat. I think Luke Barnatt possesses that unorthodox style of strike and that very awkward style of striking which we've seen so many times in the past. And I think that could be one of the difference makers in this fight with Khalidov.
Yeah, I mean, not only does Khalidov have such a high-level grappling and submission game, but his guard is one of the best and most dangerous guards that I've seen in the sport. And even if Luke finds himself in top, he's really going to struggle to fight off anything that's coming from the guard of Khalidov, as there's people out there who have just been completely bamboozled in seconds by him slipping them into an armbar, or with Kendall Grove, he just suddenly sprung into the leg lock. It just seems to catch people unawares all the time, and Luke Barnatt will have to really concentrate on the ground to even make sure he keeps up with him. His groundwork's that good. However, Luke Barnatt does have the advantage on the feet. However, some people overplay that because Khalidov's striking's also on another level. He's really just a great all-round striker and groundwork. Yeah,
he's solid.
There's not a weakness you can really point out in his game as such. So it's really a case of just trying to be better than him on the night at the area that you're good at.
Yeah, 100%. Luke's going to have to bring his A game against Khalidov. I don't like his chances on the ground. I really don't. I think Luke's got to keep it standing. He's got to keep it elusive. He's got to bounce up and down. He's got to stay off of his jab, stay out the range of Khalidov. We've seen how good Luke is when he picks his opponent apart, slowly but surely, showcasing why he is such a renowned fighter, one of the best that Britain has to offer. I think that's what he has to do. He has to slowly pick apart Khalidov over. Is it 5 rounds? Is it 3 rounds?
I think it's a 5-round main event.
5-round main event. Well, whether it's 3 rounds, 5 rounds, that's what Luke's got to do. He's got to pick Khalidov apart. But you know, it's a very tough one. Do we think that Luke Barnatt gets that call once again to the UFC if he can beat Khalidov? And vice versa as well. Does Khalidov get the call? I know he's going to be fighting on KSW as well, but the UFC have got to be looking very closely at Khalidov. I know there's a lot of money over there for him at KSW as well, which is going to try and keep him on board.
Yeah, I think at 36 years old, when you're selling out stadiums and when you're making more money than you could probably ever dream of making unless you make it to the top of UFC, I think Khalidov will be quite happy now to spend the rest of his career in Eastern Europe. Luke Barnatt, however, the UFC could very much be interested in him if he does win this fight. Obviously, Khalidov's such a difficult opponent and would rise his stock so much. But also, he's not actually lost a fight since he left the UFC.
He's been on a roll, man. But the thing is, that's against lesser opponents, and that's the big question mark here. Is Luke is once again stepping up to that level where he was very inconsistent at that UFC
in his
level.
Last 2 or 3 fights, what I've really noticed is he's really bullying guys. He's getting their backs against the cage. He's engaging in the clinch and the dirty boxing, and he's having it all his own way because, as I said, these guys just are a lower level. So it'll be really interesting to see if he goes to that game plan on Saturday. Will he be able to pull it off, and how will Khalidov react to that kind of style? I'm sure that he's coped with it before, and I'm sure he'll cope with it again. It'll just be a case of not solving the puzzle, however, just finding a way to get through it and be better on the night.
Stu, I'm going to put you on the spot right now, man. Khalidov, Barnatt, who walks away from Supersonic?
As much as I love my man Big Slow, I've got to go for Khalidov. He's just better in all areas, solid all-rounder, and I just can't pick a weakness with him. I just don't see a path to victory for Luke, unfortunately, because I just don't know where that would come. And apart from maybe a one-punch knockout, I've got to go for Khalidov. I've got to play the odds game.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree there. Big Slow, he's done some great things for UK MMA. He's been a tremendous ambassador, but I do believe that a Supersonic ACB 54 this Saturday night at the Manchester Arena is going to be Khalidov, who walks out of that fight, walks out of the main event, the victor, and goes over to KSW Coliseum in front of what I think at the minute it's looking like 35,000. Potentially it's going to be more.
And that show is going to be absolutely crazy. They're talking about setting an all-time Polish attendance record. And it's very much within their reach. The sport's that popular over there at the moment.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. I was at their London show. Was it last year? I believe it was last year. Look, I've been following the scene now for a few years. You're inside Wembley Arena. In fairness, they probably filled it out about three quarters. You know, it wasn't sold out. It wasn't a complete, chock-a-block. But there were a few empty seats, but they filled the place. They filled it. Yeah, KSW were able to put on a huge show there, an amazing atmosphere. Pujanowski in the main event. And they did it fantastically, and they're continuing to do that in their native country as well. This is probably going to be, as you say, the most attended event, of course, in Polish MMA history, Polish sports history, besides football.
For KSW really to have that size of event on these shores with no TV coverage, very little publicity. It's all very much word of mouth and hardcore fans and the Polish community we've got in this country. For them to even three-quarters fill that arena is a massive achievement in the back of very little press and very little publicity.
Yeah, no, of course, KSW doing some crazy things. But we're talking ACB. This is the ACB preview show. Right, I want to talk to you a little bit about just this crazy ACB stuff that's just been going around so much recently. It seems that every time they do something amazing, they do something shitty as well. It's like a seesaw. It really is. Let's talk about the officials first. Mark Goddard and a few other officials, well-respected officials, are not going to be at this ACB show. They're boycotting ACB due to the promoter overturning a few, I believe it was 2 results.
It was two fights in Vienna.
Yeah, so that got overturned, those results, and they weren't really kind of results that you thought, yeah, they maybe deserved to be overturned. They was kind of out of the blue.
Yeah, the owner of ACB produced a list of experts that he'd consulted with that told him that his opinion was right and the judges was wrong. On that list of experts appeared several current fighters from his own fight club gym who have never judged MMA in their lives, however they are just fighters, and that was the evidence he said he was putting forth to overturn that decision.
Yeah, it's just absolutely ludicrous. It's crazy. You have to understand where Goddard and co are coming from with this one, don't you?
Yeah, it's just a bit of the Russian people with a lot of money, like they've done in football, are just coming in and kind of doing as they please. At the end of the day, it is a sport and it can't be made into a spectacle by overturning decisions on the whim and just on their fancy. That would really hurt the legitimacy that we've strived so hard to get over the years.
It's a mess as well, because especially when you have a show, as we're saying, is rivaling the UFC in terms of publicity, it's rivaling them in terms of the quality of the card, and we're not going to see the best British officials there. Does it not make you worry about the safety of the athletes? Because that, of course, is the most paramount thing in any fight.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of fights on the card who will be English speaking up and down. You've got to wonder if no British officials are going to take part. They're probably going to be bringing them over from Russia. Now, these people will probably speak English or several languages. However, if it's not your native language and it's 2 British guys in amongst the British crowd, you've got to hope that some instruction doesn't get lost in there or some call doesn't get lost in there, and there's not something lost in translation that could really cause harm to the fighter.
Yeah, I really hope that whoever the officials they bring over, whether they're from Europe, whether from, as you say, Russia, that they're good quality and they know what they're doing. But it's hard to replace the experience and the credibility of a man like Mark Goddard. It really is. So it's a massive shame. It's a massive loss for ACB. But you can't disagree with him. I think that the whole overturning results thing, especially on, I believe he used the excuse he felt it was stopped too early.
It's just It's just insane. Can you imagine Dana White overturning a decision 3 days later because he felt the fight was stopped too early?
Yeah, man, he probably wanted to do that after Nate choked out Connor at UFC 202.
Yeah, I mean, the John Jones 12-6 elbows
Yeah,
against Matt Hamill, which caused him his only loss. I'm quite sure they'd have loved to reverse that.
of
But
course.
unfortunately, just like any other legitimate sport, such as football or basketball or anything else, these mistakes happen. They just have to be lived with, and the consequences of that is that things go on and people know better for the next time. You can't go and rewrite history because you feel a mistake's been
Mm.
made.
And the issue, of course, being there was no governing body overseeing this to kind of officiate and stop things like this happening. So I think you can look at it. There's so many factors towards this issue, but the one thing that we do know is that Mark Goddard and the British officials are not going to be at ACB this weekend, and it's a massive shame. It's a massive mess by ACB. I really hope we don't see any of this ever again with them overturning the results. I think once is bad enough, twice is even worse, as we saw. Let that be it. Let's not see that again. And hopefully, if the promotion continue to do well, especially with the new signings that we'll discuss in a second, that they can make amends with Mark Goddard and they can make amends with the British officials as well.
Yep. Just when you're talking about new signings, yeah, there is some really exciting names coming in. The most recently just added an hour before we started recording tonight.
Go on. Who is it?
Albert Tumenov has signed with ACB now.
Yeah, it's mad. I saw in our MMA Plus group chat that Tumanov had signed, and you just have to think now, like, where these guys get money from? Like, look at the names they're bringing in. Mizugaki, Bubba Jenkins just signed recently. He's going to be on this card as well. It's just ludicrous that now the guys that you would have thought, well, they could still be in the UFC, are now coming over to ACB and making it an even better promotion.
They must be getting offered a serious amount of money because when Bellator makes an offer to a star, you've got this back and forth of whether the UFC will match it or not
Mm.
because they've got the right to. When ACB are making offers, it's just a done deal the next day because I think that the price that they're giving, the contract they're giving these guys is so ludicrous. The UFC's just looking at it and going, "Yeah, you're okay, pass."
You go ahead, man. You go to Russia on that kind of money.
Yeah,
I don't even think we could guess.
I think that the quality of the ACB card this weekend is of similar quality to some of the lesser UFC fight night cards that come
Yes.
up during the year. There's no difference, absolutely no difference at all.
And one of those fights, Ali Bagov, Bubba Jenkins, that's an interesting one as well, I think. Bubba Jenkins coming over after some time in Bellator, and mixed bag of tricks for him in Bellator. Lost to Georgiou Karakayan on his way out there, but he looked okay against Gota Yamochi, and he's proven himself as one of those tough, durable guys. You know, he doesn't get tired. He'll stick in there for all the rounds. And it's going to be interesting against Bagov because Bagov's like one of them tough mofos, and he'll take a shot to give a shot.
Yeah, well, Bagov's just coming off a fail to win the lightweight title. The last time he had to retire after the first round at ACB 48. He was pointing to his ear, saying there was an injury with his ear. Most of the follow-up after that was in Russian. I couldn't really follow up after the event to see if he really did have an issue.
Yeah.
But he's been off since October, so it's quite possible that there was something wrong. These guys seem to have quite quick turnaround in the Russian leagues and the Russian promotions, and they seem to be back every 2-3 months. So the fact that he has took 6 months off, there might have been a problem after all. One of the things about Ali Bagov is he has a loss to Khabib Nurmagomedov in his
Yeah.
record from earlier on in his career. One of the things most people know him for. But he has some really good wins over some good level guys. Okay, it's all been kind of on the regional scene and all in ACB, and it's not some big names, but the guys he's been fighting have got some good records.
Yeah, like just looking through those now, you know, he's not been fighting cans. He's been fighting the best that's been available to him anyway. So I think it's definitely a step up against Bubba Jenkins, just because Bubba has got that experience at a very good level in Bellator. I don't know, man. I think Bagov should take this pretty comfortably because Jenkins is just so inconsistent. I just feel that you think that, okay, he's going to come into this one, he's going to grind it out, he's really good at that, that's where he feels comfortable. But like we saw against Karakayan, not once but twice, he got caught early.
I like to look for little X factors in matchups, and sometimes it's little silly things or little gut feelings. But Jenkins is a really high level wrestler. He was an NCAA Division One champion in 2011 for Arizona State. Uh, just having that kind of level of wrestling taken over to Russia against somebody that may not have necessarily fought a lot against that American style of wrestling, is used to the Sambo style, it might throw Ali Bagov off his game a little bit.
Yeah.
It's just a little gut feeling, but there could be little slight differences. He's not used to wrestling his Sambo style that could cause him issues and could cause him maybe some adjustment issues at the start that he has to get used to.
It's that interesting Russian versus American wrestling style, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be a straight up wrestle fest. Don't tune in if you're a noob and you want to see striking. However, anyone else will find it really interesting because there will be some really gritty groundwork going on in that fight.
Okay, look, we talked about it a little bit briefly earlier. Brendan Loughnane, Mike Wilkinson, the rematch. No bad blood there. A lot of respect between both guys. Both guys in very good positions now as well. Brendan probably more so than Mike, but they've both got credibility coming out of the UFC. Mike's had a tough time. We saw him making his debut at ACB 41, I believe. Yep. Didn't do too well, though, against Soso Nihondrades.
Yeah, I believe a shoulder injury's kept Mike out for quite a while as well. It's meant he's only had 2 fights in the last 2.5 years. So there's always that kind of question of, is he really getting into a rhythm? Is he really finding time to get back on track and get those wins together? Or is it this kind of start-stop between fights? Is it really disrupting what he's trying to do going forward? Whereas Brendan, on the other hand, he's in a roll just now. His last 3 wins have all been by KO, TKO, and I believe you've seen him recently at Tanko. He looked really impressive.
Yeah, no, he looked great. I didn't see this. I wasn't there for the second fight against Paul Cook. I was there for the first fight against Eden Newton. He's leaps and bounds ahead of Eden Newton and Paul Cook as well. I think with Brendan Loughnane, the question keeps being asked, when is he going to be ready for that UFC call? When is he going to get that shot once again after the Ultimate Fighter to go back to the UFC? We thought maybe if he beat Duquesnoy back at Bama 22, it could have been back then. Controversial loss that people still talk about to this very day. And Tom Duquesnoy, of course, now in the UFC as well. I think Brandon, if he beats Mike Wilkinson, he avenges that loss, the one loss that, besides Tom Duquesnoy, has plagued him for a large majority of his career. And I think that the UFC have to make the decision to bring one of this country's best fighters up to the main roster on the UFC.
Yeah, I think as well, because it's a rematch of a fight that originally happened in UFC, there will be eyes on it in some way and in some capacity, because they know these guys have got what it takes, and they know these guys do deserve a second chance, especially Brendan, who only had that one fight and then never got another opportunity. But so, yeah, I completely agree that this should be his opportunity now to go forward and to get that call-up he's been waiting for.
Yeah, 100%. Brendan needs to watch out for the unpredictability of Wilkinson, though. We saw it against Backstrom. That knockout coming out of nowhere. Mike Wilkinson, he's looked a bit flat against Makwan and against Soso as well. But if he's back to the Mike Wilkinson of old, back in his form, I think that Brendan needs to be careful, because sometimes Brendan likes to drop his hands and he gets a bit too comfortable out there.
As someone who's familiar with the fighters, what do you think the drop in weight will do this time? It was fought at lightweight the last time, now it's featherweight. How do both guys look? I mean, how do you think it will change the matchup?
There were a lot of questions going into there. A lot of people thinking that, he was going to struggle, Backstrom was going to dominate him, Backstrom was going to wrestle him. And obviously he got that flash KO. It was awesome. But every other fight, Honey Jason struggled there, got submitted in the first round. Makwan Amirkhani got out wrestled. So he just, he got ground out. Brendan Loughnane can do that. He has that ability. I don't think it matters to Brendan. Brendan can go up between feather and lightweight pretty well, to be honest. Personally, I think he looks better at 155, but I have no worries that he's going to lose too much at 45. I don't think it's going to play that much of an advantage. I feel that Brendan's going to have the edge anyway. Brendan's going to grind him out, man. That's how I'm looking at this.
Yeah, I like the look of the form books in this one, and they're both great fighters, but Mike's not been having the greatest runs of late. Brendan's on fire just now, and I just think it's Brendan's time to avenge that loss and really get that call-up he deserves to the UFC. And if he doesn't get it this time round, we know he's probably only one fight away from getting it.
I can't imagine if he wins this one. I can't imagine it being too much longer for him to wait after that. It'll either be after this or potentially one more. I don't know who else he can fight, though. That's the question. I think Mike Wilkinson's the biggest fight left for him.
Yeah, I mean, those big fights now are for him in the UFC. He would have to go forward, and he'd have to get called up. I mean, I suppose there's always the option of sticking about in ACB, fighting the best they've got to offer if UFC don't come knocking yet. However, everyone wants to be over in the UFC, and I'm sure that's where he sees himself.
Yeah, that's all that Brendan talks about, man. I know how much it means to him. I know how much he wants to be in the UFC. And I think if he gets past Mike, then it's a complete reality, without question. Another fight that was originally scheduled to this card, and people were looking at it like, wow, this is amazing. Pat Healy, Saul Rogers. It was a salivating matchup, really. We're not getting it anymore.
Yeah.
And
Thanks,
you wouldn't have even figured that out. ACB didn't actually tell anyone. They didn't make a release that this fight was cancelled. And I believe they still haven't.
They still haven't. They did reply to an email I sent asking for a statement on it, saying they would get back to me, and claiming they were unaware of the situation.
Unaware of the situation that Pat Healy was injured. Pat Healy tweeted us because we did a tweet saying it's ACB fight week. Cannot wait. Pat Healy saw Rogers. Yeah. And he was like, what? I'm not on that card. I am not on that card. He got injured a few weeks back. He's apparently told the promotion that. And up until February 23rd is when the last press release that we received with the final fight card, he was still listed.
Yeah, and the worst of it is that Severe MMA's Niall McGrath done a little bit more digging and found that there was, in fact, another opponent had already signed a contract, but now he's dropped out because his flight arrangements didn't come through until yesterday.
That's mental, mate. And you know why that's mental? I'm going to bring this up as well. On Saturday last week, ACB tweeted a picture of the Russians arriving in Manchester a week before the show. 7 whole days. 7 whole days, man. Now, I have never heard of fighters arriving maybe on their own dime.
Yeah,
but not on the promotion's dime, mate. 7 days before a show. I did a bit more digging as well. And obviously what we've just said there, the flight arrangements didn't get given. I think he wasn't going to arrive until Wednesday or Thursday from what I've heard anyway.
Yeah, and I heard there was murmurings that although they've brought all the Russians over, there was some sort of email or memo went out telling the domestic guys they weren't welcome there until the day of the fight.
Really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, I couldn't find any concrete information on it earlier, but there was a screenshot going about, and it was just a tight bit of paper, so how legitimate it was, who knows. However, it came from a credible source that said that, the domestic guys aren't to arrive until either the day before the fight or the day of the fight. Guys that are...
I'd imagine it's the day before because weigh-ins and stuff like that.
But basically they've instructed all these guys that yous must come at this time, yous must come at that time. But all our Russian athletes, they can come over and have a blast.
Yeah, and that's crazy because especially I called them out on Twitter. I said, what the hell? Why the Russians come in 7 days? And apparently all international athletes have the option to come over a week before the show. I followed up with a few Brits that have been over to Russia, and they all told me the same thing. They got flown out, I believe it was 4 days before the fight.
Yeah.
On the Wednesday or the Tuesday. That's not 7 days, man. And to readjust, I just think it's absolutely crazy that a Russian promotion are flying out the Russian athletes 7 days before a show and then telling the Brits, telling the Americans they can't come till Thursday night or Friday or whatever the hell's happening.
It's just another example of this company taking 2 steps forward to always take that 1 step back with their reputation every single time. Every single time there seems to be a show, it does really well, there's either something before it or something directly after it that causes that show to kind of lose some of its shine. And that will we'll hope that the action's good enough on Saturday, we'll forget all these issues and at least we're kind of airing them before the show instead of after.
See, that's the thing. I just think the communication is a massive issue. If this fight has been off between Saul and Pat for 2 weeks, they found a replacement that didn't get announced. They didn't send his flight details until yesterday. Vinny Magel-Hayes is also off the card. That's not been officially announced either, but there's been confirmation from Vinny that he's no longer fighting Promislav Maisiala either.
Yeah.
Like, dude, come on. You're putting on a show this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, these are two guys that are still pushing and promoting for appearing on Saturday. I mean, Saul Rogers was doing radio on Radio Lancashire, doing promotion for the event as recently as the start of the week, still saying
he was on MUTV, man. He was on Manchester United television, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't get much bigger than that in the MU area.
Yeah, I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, he's still on these shows going, yeah, I'm fighting Pat Healy. You're not telling me he wasn't told about his opponent switch.
The guy signed to a multi-fight deal with ACB. Of course he was told.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to spoil his end of the bargain, and neither would I, because those guys won't care. They won't honour your contract. They'll just cut you. They'll just be like, right, you're done.
I think that there's some kind of investment in Saul. He's one of a few that's legitimately been given a multi-fight deal. They want to push him.
What actually shocked me about Saul was actually his age. I caught a glimpse of it the other day and I couldn't believe it. The guy looks old enough to be my dad and he's the same age as me.
I don't think he looks that old. I mean, I've seen him up close and personal at SPG.
Maybe it's just the pictures, but I don't know. I've always thought he looked in his kind of mid to late 30s, and then I see the age and he's, 27? And I was like, wow, I did not think that. He looks a lot older than what he is.
That's a fair enough comment, mate. I can't agree, but that's fair enough. Maybe
because you've seen him in person. We'll do it.
Maybe it's because I've seen him in person. I've seen how badass he looks in person. Saul, I'm not going to mess with you, man. You do your thing.
Next time you go and see him, Rob will have to knock up a great portrait for me to see him properly.
We've got some footage, actually, when we were down there before Cage Warriors filming with Martin Stapleton and Matt Inman. So, yeah, maybe we'll release that, actually. Yeah. But he's not even fighting this weekend, apparently, so who knows. Yeah. We're still waiting for confirmation on that one. Right. The last fight that we wanted to talk about in depth before we kind of graze over the rest of the card and close out this preview show. I like this one. You like this one. Everybody should like this one. Dean Garnett, Michael Tobin. God, this is a good fight, man.
It's actually a really great fight. One of the main reasons I wanted to talk about it was Michael Tobin's good, but he's not as good as everyone says he is. I don't know if everyone's aware. He is 12-0. It was around the Australian regionals, and he's won 2 featherweight titles at different regionals in the area. He's fought for both Brace and Eterno. However, the kicker here is that most of the guys he's faced have had losing records, including one who has a record of 1-15.
Yeah, that was Craig Lancaster, right?
Yeah. How can you end up with a 1-15 record? Is that not time you stop? Is your family not intervened? Do you not have any friends? 1-15 is an awfully far way to go when you suck at something.
I'm going to say 2 names to you. I want you to do your MMA homework after we finish this show. Sean Lomas, Andy Kona. The rest is history, man. I want you to go research that after this show. The people who are listening, if you know, you know. I think, 1-15, that's crazy, but that's definitely not Andy Kona, Sean Lomas.
Yeah, I think we might have to join up and do a Paycheck Collectors United for the website at some point.
Okay, Michael Tobin, Dean Garnett. Dean's training out of Liverpool. He works with a good friend of mine, Mr. Ben Crichton, who is a nutritionist expert. He's always speaking up about Dean Garnett to me. We last saw him, I believe, Bellator 158, London, Louis Toaster, split draw. One of those fights, I heard that he struggled a little bit with the weight cut leading up to that fight, and I think that was one of the major reasons why we didn't see the Dean Garnett that, maybe we'd potentially seen before that, when he'd submitted Martin Sheridan so well at Cage Warriors 70. John Cullen before that as well, the leg lock specialist.
Yeah, I was really impressed.
We didn't quite see that from
I was Garnett. Really impressed with the leg lock wins at Cage Warriors, actually. I'm a fan of a good leg lock, I must say, and you don't see leg lock finishes often enough, so to see 2 in a row was fantastic. It does seem to be improving, and I was impressed regardless of him drawing with Toster. He did struggle a little bit, but I really feel the decision could have gone his way, and it was a bit harsh. So all was not lost, and Yeah, I mean he's stepping up in weight from bantamweight. He's going up to featherweight now for this fight, and hopefully the extra weight will do him some good, like it has many other fighters before him.
Yeah, I really don't think bantamweight was a place for him to be.
Yeah,
As I said, I heard the rumblings that he had some real issues with the weight cut before that fight. So I'm happy to see him back at featherweight. I don't want to see him drain himself, and I think we're going to see a better version of him
yeah. I mean,
at featherweight as
we're
well.
seeing more and more guys stepping up a weight now, coming to terms with the fact that yeah, you don't have to fight at the extremes to be the best, and it's paying off for a lot of guys. It seems to be a new way of thinking. A lot people need to get to grips with this and start fighting at their not their natural weight, but an easier to make weight for them. There's no point in stripping all that weight off yourself to be a depleted version of yourself in fight night.
I think the real question is we've talked about the weight issues. We're hopefully going to see the best version of Dean Garnett, but Michael Tobin, is it real or is it hype? Are
Well,
we going to find out at ACB 54?
this is definitely the first big test for him. Nobody's fought so far, I would say, was in the realms of, yeah, that was a really big test, or oh, that must have been challenging for him. It seems he's been given all kind of gimme fights around the scene. He's the big thing coming out of Australia, but yeah, he's not fought anyone I note yet. This will be interesting, and it will be the first real yardstick we've got of what kind of talent we've got here. And that's strange to say over somebody that's 12-0, but unfortunately, that's the predicament he finds himself in.
It's a great fight. It definitely is. It's a testament to the card that you have this and you look down and you look up and you're like, wow, you could realistically, if I was trying to book a prelim card and a main card, like most of these fights would fit either or. You could put them on the main card, put them on the prelims because it's that stacked.
Yeah, and I think, as we said earlier, you could take most of the fights and put them straight into a UFC fight night card, and there wouldn't be much difference in quality. They're really delivering a card to us in Manchester this weekend, and it's something we should all kind of be thankful for because they could have gave us a lot worse, and we certainly are getting a lot worse in the undercards coming up in the next few weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Looking at like some of the fights, these are the fights personally I feel would fit into that UFC London card seamlessly, like they are a UFC fight. Bobby Jenkins, Ali Bagov, of course, would definitely fit in there. Mike Wilkinson, Brendan Loughnane, go figure. Saul Rogers, Pat Healy, if that was still on.
Yeah.
I think Garnett, Tobin, that would fit on a Bellator show. If that was on Bellator 179, I wouldn't flinch an eyelid. And then Luke Barnatt, Khalidov, man. Like, that's arguably a better main event than Jimmy Manuwa, Corey Anderson.
Yeah, especially with Khalidov. A lot of people interested to see how he does, and I'll be one of those people watching and waiting. I really think he's going to live up to everything we know he is from KSW. And yeah, I like Big Slow, but sorry, I don't think you're going to win, and I think Khalidov's got this one in the bag.
Mamed Khalidov, he's definitely the favourite leading into this fight. And we're going to find out on Saturday night if he can get another huge scalp on his record. I was there in Glasgow for their first UK show. Bit of a disappointing attendance, in my opinion. I feel that they, with all the promotion that they put into it, they would have wanted more, and I know they wanted more as well. I think Manchester, they've got the right mixture of local talent, international flavour on there that they should do well. I'm hoping for their sakes that they put 2,000-3,000, if not more.
A big issue with the Glasgow show was the lack of promotion locally. I live 5 minutes round the corner from the Hydro, and I literally did not know the event was on until maybe 4 or 5 days beforehand. There was nothing locally, no articles in the local papers, absolutely zero in terms of this is on, come check this out. If they'd advertised it, they'd got a lot better turnout. People in Glasgow like fight nights, boxing sells out regularly here, smaller MMA shows sell out regularly here, and so does not in the same ballpark, but the little professional wrestling shows do really well up here. There's no reason they couldn't have got a lot more fans in the Glasgow show. It was just down to a complete lack of promotion.
I think they were in that Scottish newspaper. Is it called the Daily Record?
Oh yeah, the Daily Record. Yeah, my granddad actually pointed out there was an article in there, but it was like 2 days before the event or something like that.
Would you say that was the wrong demographic they were going for? Who reads the Daily Record? Do you read it?
Yeah, you're certainly not going to get many 18 to 30-year-olds reading the Daily Record.
Okay. I think they choked out a Celtic goalkeeper. I think that was on the front cover or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Whatever the hell, in that area, is Celtic big or not?
Yeah, yeah, massive. I mean, Rangers and Celtic, two biggest football clubs, and football being the biggest sport, it's like, yeah, it kind of rules life up here. So if they were going to do promotion with anyone, then yeah, the Celtic goalkeeper would be good to start. But yeah, it's just strange. There was no posters, there's no anything. I said I literally live 5 minutes round the corner, and like the path from my house all the way around to the venue, it's just like posters all the way as you go for all different gigs coming up.
Yeah.
Not one ACB poster on the whole stretch.
I can't comment on posters and promotion because I don't live in the area, but I was at UFC Glasgow and I was at ACB Glasgow, and I can tell you it was a world and apart difference, and so be it. And so, of course, because the UFC is the UFC, and ACB, that was their first show into a new environment, a new country, and of course there were lots of challenges to preside with it. But yeah, man, I think they've done a lot better this time with the promotion. There is the credit there, albeit it has false promotion potentially at times with Stuart Rodger, etc., etc. But I think they've learned from their lesson. They've stacked the card from top to bottom. I think we're going to see some amazing fights, and I would not be surprised if, after all is said and done, after next week, we say ACB 54 was a better show than UFC London.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'm actually a really big convert over to ACB. I haven't missed an event since like ACB 45, I think it is now. I really enjoy it. You're guaranteed to see some great finishes up and down the cards every single time they're on. Some great fights and no faff in between, no fluff. Just fight after fight after fight. Sit down, watch it. 3 hours of fantastic fighting. You can't beat it for fans like us.
Is the motto less show, more fight?
Oh yeah, that's the motto, and it's completely true. There is absolutely no kind of analysis in between. As the winner's leaving the cage, the next guy's walking down the ramp.
Well, that's great. That works for them. I know it's a cool motto, and there's a hell of a lot of fights that they need to get through, so I hope there's no dancing and buffer periods between the fights as well.
It can be a bit of an endurance, and sometimes when you're watching one of the shows from Russia, and it's all Russian athletes, they can kind of sometimes blend into one another because it's hard for us to remember all the big long names a lot of times, and sometimes they're very easily confused. However, this event with a little bit more of a westernised feel should be a bit different, a bit easier to get into for the casual watcher, and definitely a must-see for this weekend.
Okay, we're about to wrap up. Before we go, sleeper fight of the weekend. In my opinion, Danny Mitchell, Andy Devent. That's mine. I think people need to keep an eye on it. Which is your sleeper fight of the weekend?
Sleeper fight of the weekend is the co-main event. So it's Khalidov versus, Popescu?
Yeah, Ion Popescu.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great fight. Khalidov's the cousin of Khalidov. They train together closely. Big things are expected of him. He lost recently in his last outing for ACB. He was expected to win the fight, and it was a massive upset. So this is him really trying to strike back. And Popescu has fought in the UK before. He's somebody that's known to UK fans. So it's definitely a fight to keep an eye on.
Well, there you have it. That's mine and Stuart's thoughts on ACB 54 Supersonic this weekend. Hey, I love me a bit of Oasis, man. I quite like that little reference there. But I'm more of a Morning Glory fan, I'll tell you that.
You know what? I didn't even get that reference till you just mentioned it.
The week of the goddamn fight, you didn't even get the reference.
Honestly, I've been wondering to myself why it's called ACB Supersonic.
Oasis, man. It's a popular Oasis tune.
Yeah, I get that now. You see, the minute you said it, I can see it now. I just did not get that until now.
You're technically Northern. Aren't you supposed to be one in line and one in tune with Oasis?
Yeah, I mean, the worst of it was I actually really liked them when I was younger. It's just, they didn't make that connection. I suppose the Manchester Oasis connection, just I didn't jump to it straight away, and especially not with a Russian promotion. If it was maybe a British promotion, I'd catch on a bit quicker, but I didn't think they'd be in the bandwagon.
Well, ACB Glasgow was called Braveheart, man. Like, come on. Could we get a more Scottish name than Braveheart?
Well, you see, if it was ACB Coronation Street, then I'd have got it straight away, right?
I love that. I absolutely love it. But there we have it. ACB Supersonic this weekend at the Manchester Arena. MMA Plus will be on hand with some excellent coverage. Myself, Stephen Flynn, will be there. MMAplus.co.uk. But it has been me, Andreas Georgiou, and my buddy Stuart Rodger with this very special MMA Plus preview show. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the fights. And of course, we'll see you soon.